Hi everybody, this is Kurt Gardner for VFXHaiku.com, and today we're going to do a pretty cool tutorial. We're going to take a look at doing sky replacements in After Effects. I've got this piece of footage here. Let's just take a look at it. And basically what this is I was on a boat and we were just sort of traveling. I think we were just sort of floating along, or maybe we were actually using the motor. It doesn't really matter anyway. We were floating around and we were just kind of going forward through this bay here, and it's a neat looking shot, but the sky is really boring. It would be really nice if we could make this look more like a sunset. So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this footage and kind of make it look like this. So we're going to add a new sky into the background, add this really cool looking lens flare, and figure out how to add some reflections into the water from our new sky. So that's what we're going to do, and let's fire into After Effects and start going. Okay, so here we are inside of After Effects. Now, there's quite a few things going on in this comp, and you can sort of see here I've got a zillion pre-comps sort of loaded up here, because putting this effect together is pretty complicated, and it takes a lot of steps in order to go through it. So let's just start at the first step here, which is basically what we need to do is we need to track our original footage here so that we can apply our sky in, and it has all the same motion that our background does. So basically we want to find a spot on this footage somewhere that we can apply two tracking points to, because we're going to have to track both the position, the rotation, and the scale of this footage. So basically we want to try to find something that's not moving. So on this side of the screen here, or this side of the shot, there's actually quite a few things. We can track any point pretty much along this side of the trees. But finding something on the right hand side is a little bit more difficult, because if you look at on this side, there's actually some parallax going on here. We've got some footage in the foreground, and then there's these trees in the background. So we want to make sure we don't actually track this stuff, because that's moving in a different direction. You can kind of see that that's moving a little bit to the right, because we're traveling past it. And these trees are a lot further into the distance. So we want to make sure we track the points that are sort of the most stable and most locked down in this shot. So we want to track something over here and something over here. So let's just start a new comp. So I'm going to drag this onto the new comp icon here. And I'm just going to drag this outside of our folder here just to keep all this stuff organized. So I'm going to double click on our footage, and I'm going to go into our tracker, and we're going to track motion. So I'm going to hit that, and it's going to bring up tracking point number 1 here. Oops, made that a little bit too big. So I'm just going to drag that over here onto this guy, and then just kind of center on that, make this a little bit smaller, maybe recenter a little bit more. And then this is obviously way too big. Oop. Just undo that. Just recenter that again. There we go. So something like that. That should be good. And I might even make that a little bit smaller. Okay, so that should be good for tracking point 1. Now tracking point 2, I'm going to, in order to actually make another tracking point, I have to tell After Effects that I want to actually track rotation as well. So I'm going to click that, but in this case we want to actually track all three. Since we're traveling towards this background, it actually scales up very slightly. So we want to make sure we track position, rotation, and scaling. So I'm going to turn all three of those on. I'm just going to move this guy over, let's say to this little part right there. Let's try that out. So I'm going to zoom in, kind of line that up a bit, and just sort of make the search area something like that. So that should be okay. Alright, so now we have to do the boring step, which is actually track the footage. So I'm just going to go and hit track forward, and let's just keep an eye on both of those track points. And actually that looked pretty solid. That looks like it tracked it pretty good. So I'm just going to zoom out on the timeline here just to scrub back and forth. Take a look at that one. That looks pretty good. And let's just take a look at this guy. Yeah, that looks pretty good too. Okay, so I think these tracking points are going to be alright. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually apply this tracking data to something. And in this case, since we're going to be using this tracking data for multiple things, we're going to actually use this tracking data for masks, we're going to use it for the background, and we're going to use it for the reflection in the water here. So I don't want to apply this tracking data to this layer itself. I'm going to actually apply it to a null. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up to the layer, new, and apply a new null object. And then under motion target here, I'm going to go edit target, and I'm going to choose the null layer. Hit OK, and then I'm going to make sure I'm on the first frame and hit apply. And it's going to ask me if I want to apply the dimensions in X and Y, and we're going to hit OK. So now basically what's happened now is we've got this one null, and it has all that rotation and scale and position information kind of like baked into it. So that one layer now has all that tracking information in it. We can sort of copy and paste and refer and parent things to that null layer, and that's going to be really, really handy as we sort of go through this here. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is actually start to drop in our sky and just sort of see how the tracking data is kind of working with the plate here. So I've actually already got my sky asset, so I'm going to just drop it into my comp here, and it's really, really large. It's actually a 180 sky panorama that looks pretty cool. So I'm just going to scale this down a bit and position it roughly where I want it. So I kind of want that sun to be like right in the middle there, something like that. And so then what I'm going to do is just really simply, I'm just going to parent this to the null. And if we just sort of move forward, we should see that that sky is now tracked into place on top of our footage. And it's actually scaling and rotating and moving exactly how it should. Now, it's kind of tough to tell because we can't see the tree line yet, because we need to key out the sky in order to really make sure this is locked down solid. So let's actually go through and do that step. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this layer here. I'm just going to duplicate it, and we're going to pre-compose that one layer, and we're just going to call this sky key, like that. So we're going to go inside of that layer, and now this is where we're going to do our key. So what I'm going to use in order to do this is just one of the really, really simple color keying tools. I'm just going to use the color key. Let's drag that over here. If I can grab it. There we go. And basically this is a really, really simple tool. All you need to do is just click on the eyedropper, pick a color, and then sort of choose your threshold, and it kind of goes through and keys out everything that it can. Now, I already did this tutorial once, so rather than trying to hunt and peck and find a good number value, I'm just going to punch in what I had before, which was 212, 255, and 255. And the tolerance I had set to around 165 or so, something like that. Even that's not perfect, so I'm just going to take the tolerance and just sort of drag it up a little bit more. And so now you can tell what's happening here. It's actually keying out the sky, but it's also keying out a little bit of the water, and that's okay because we're just going to limit this key to the sky rather than having it key a little bit of both. I'm just scrubbing through here, and you can actually see a little bit of garbage coming through on the corner here in this frame, so I'm just going to bring that up a little bit more just to get rid of that. So something like that. Alright, that's looking relatively okay. Okay, so now how do we stop the color key from actually keying both the top and bottom of the shot here? And so in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, rather than apply this color key to the layer itself, I'm going to apply it to an adjustment layer. So I'm just going to throw in a new adjustment layer, then I'm going to cut this color key and I'm going to paste it onto this adjustment layer. Now basically we've got this isolated, and when we have that, what I can do is I can just take a mask and kind of go like this and just say, okay, I just want to isolate it. Well, what it's doing is it's isolating it to the bottom, and so now what I'm going to do is just invert that mask. And now that's essentially just isolated to the top. But since this footage is moving around, I kind of want that mask to move with it. And so this is kind of the power here. So what I can do is I can go back to my original layer here, copy this null, and then go back into the sky key and just paste it in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to parent this adjustment layer to the null. And as soon as I do that, watch my mask. Now it's moving right along with that footage. So I don't even need to animate or track that mask. Now you can see what's happening in the corner here. Since this mask, or since this adjustment layer is now being tracked basically to the plate, it's actually kind of moving out to the side. So I need to take this adjustment layer, just kind of make it a little bit bigger just to make sure it doesn't creep in on any of the edges. So I'm just going to scrub through here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. All right, I think I can live with that. All right, so let's go back to our original layer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this panorama layer, which is on the top now, and I'm just going to put it underneath, just like that. And so now we've got our sky kind of really, really roughly put into place in our shot. And you can see that that's already starting to sit in there. And the motion is looking pretty good, and I think the track is working pretty decently. So that's working awesome. All right, so let's move on to the next step. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're just going to key out the water, and so we can have an accurate reflection of our sky in the water. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a duplicate of this sky key comp here, just duplicate this guy, and we're just going to name this water key now, like that, and let's open that guy up. And so basically now what we want to do is we want to do this exact same thing, but we just want to key the bottom part. So I'm actually just going to invert this mask, and now this color key is actually keying out the water rather than the sky. And it's just using the same mask, and it's all tracked into place, and everything is hunky-dory. But what we're going to do is, rather than using a color key tool, we're going to use a different keyer. What we're going to do is we're going to use which one is it here? How come I don't see it? Linear color key, that's the one. Okay, and so there's all sorts of different keyers you can use, and in this case I'm just sort of using a different one just because I got a little bit better results out of this. So I'm just going to click right in the middle here, and then I'm just going to expand this mask just a tiny little bit, just like that, and maybe get a little bit more. Oops, I just go like that, a little bit more down here maybe. That might be a little bit too much. So I'm just going to leave this mask a little bit fuzzier. Just leave a little bit of those dark edges kind of creeping in the corners there. Okay, so now that we've basically got our key for our reflection, now what I'm going to do is just sort of throw in our flip sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this water key comp, and I'm just going to pre-comp it again, and we're just going to call this now, oops, I'm going to click it up here and call this water reflection. I'm just going to open this guy up. And what we're going to do in here is we're just going to take another copy of our sky, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that from our main comp here. So I'm going to grab this guy, just copy it, and paste it into place, and I'm just going to scale it to negative of the Y value here. So it kind of flips upside down, and then just move it down. And so we want to kind of position it roughly in the flip spot right there. And then I'm just going to put it underneath of our footage here, and I think that's looking kind of okay. Alright, so now that's roughly in the right position. So what we're actually going to do here, now I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the sky in the main comp here, is I'm actually just going to parent it to this null. So I'm going to go copy, I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to parent it to null2, and now that should move and track into position. Alright, so that's in place. So now the way we're actually going to do this is we're just going to cut out the water, and so I'm going to put the water key footage on top here, and I'm going to set this as an alpha matte, or actually an alpha inverted matte rather, of the water key layer. And so now basically what we've got here is we've got the water kind of just sitting on the top here, kind of floating along. Now it doesn't really look realistic, and that's because we have to add some displacement into the sky layer and put some blur on it in order to kind of make it look like it's a real reflection. So what we're going to do then is we're just going to take this water reflection layer, and we're just going to drop it on top of our main comp. So I'm going to take it here, and I'm going to put it underneath of our, or on top of our sky layer rather. So it's just sitting on top, and so that's kind of looking a little bit cheesy right now. It doesn't really look very good. So let's just kind of massage this into place a bit. So let's take the water reflection layer, and let's just change the transfer mode here to overlay. So that's looking a little bit better already. It's kind of blending with the water that's underneath of it. And then let's just play around with the hue and saturation of actually both of these layers and sort of just adjust the color so they kind of sit a little bit better. So let's play with the top one first. Let's play with the skies. So let's go in here, let's take color correction, and let's take the exposure tool. And let's take that exposure and let's just sort of crank it up just a tiny little bit. Just something like that. And let's take the gamma and really sort of brighten up this sky, so it's not as contrasty. Somewhere around 1.6 looks alright. Something like that, yeah. And so now what we want to do is, now that that's in there, we want to just blur this sky a little bit, because this footage that I took here was shot with my Panasonic GF1, and the resolution of this footage is 720p, but this footage looks a lot more crisp. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to blur this footage, put a little bit of a fast blur on it, just like 1 pixel. Maybe even 1.5 pixels, just to kind of smooth it out a little bit and sort of de-res that footage a little bit to make it smush in a little bit better with the surrounding footage. So that's looking a little bit better now for the top. Now let's try to make the bottom look a little bit better. So let's take this water reflection layer, and let's put let's say color correction, let's put an exposure on it, and let's take the exposure down just a little bit. Yeah, even something pretty far. Let's try going to like -2, and then let's take the gamma and let's boost it up. Let's boost it way up. Let's try that around 3 point something. That's looking pretty decent. That's looking like a really decent reflection there. If we kind of scrub through, It's starting to feel a little bit better now. It still needs some displacement, so let's do that. So we'll grab that under the distort displacement map. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the displacement layer map and we're going to choose the original footage, which is the bottom layer here. And you can automatically see as soon as we do that, our water starts to get displaced, or our sky rather starts to get displaced. So what I'll do is I'll set these both to the red channel and we'll just take the vertical displacement. There we go. That's kind of doing something. That might be a bit much. Just something around like that, and maybe take the horizontal displacement just a little bit like that. So that's looking a little bit better. So now our water is actually being displaced by this original footage. And so now the last thing we're going to do here is just apply a little bit of a vertical blur onto this whole thing, I think. So we'll take a directional blur and let's just crank this up a little bit. Something like that. That actually looks pretty good, around 20. Like that, before and after. Yeah, I like that. That's looking all right. So if I just turn off all those effects here, we can see what it looked like before, which is pretty unrealistic. And now after, that's looking a lot better. So if we scrub through this whole thing, oh yeah, that's starting to sit together pretty nice. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So the next thing we want to sort of pay attention to here is the edges. If we zoom in, we're looking at this at full quality right now, and you can sort of see the top layer of these trees. They're looking a little bit ratty. It's kind of looking like a little bit of an unrealistic comp, especially along the edge right here. And there's a couple of things we can try to do to actually play around with this. And I just want to show you one of the new things that's in CS5, which is actually kind of cool. If I just zoom in here, sort of go over to the left-hand side, there's this new filter called under, where is it, matte? It's called Refine Matte. And it sort of does this kind of pixel estimation, motion estimation kind of thing. And it tries to actually smooth out and sort of decontaminate the edges of your matte based upon the whatever algorithm this thing is working with. I was kind of playing with this earlier, and if you just sort of set these settings to something like this, it kind of helps these edges a little bit. So basically what it's doing here is there's this decontamination subcategory here, and if I set this to 0, you can actually see that it's trying to decontaminate a little bit of those edges and try to getting rid of that little bit of that blue sky that's in there and get that out. And you can actually show the decontamination map here, and you can actually extend it by like a couple of pixels or so. You can extend it by 1 or 2 pixels. And you can kind of see the results of that when you go back, and it actually tries to get rid of some of those edges. So if I go back to our original comp now and I kind of look here, you can see that those blue edges it's trying to get rid of them. It does a decent job in some situations. In this case, it's not doing as good of a job as I would have hoped. If I played around with it a little bit more, I could probably get some better results, but in this case I just decided to leave it off, and I'll show you another way to kind of get around this. So there's another tutorial that I did that was involved light wrap and edge blur, and what we're going to look at is just doing some edge blur on here to kind of fuzz out these edges a little bit. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sky key comp, I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this one sky edges. And let's just open this guy up. And so on this adjustment layer here, or actually I'm going to make a new adjustment layer rather. And let's apply the channel, set channels. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set all of the RGB channels to be the alpha channel. So basically now what we've got, if I turn off transparency here, is we got a black and white matte of our key. So what we need to do here is we need to find a way to kind of define the area that's between these two black and white areas here. So we need to basically make a mask that just is along this edge. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go into the Stylize menu, choose Find Edges, and if I turn transparency back on, you can see this. Now we've got this basically 1 pixel black edge along the edge of this mask. Now as 1 pixel, it doesn't really do us much good, so if I use the simple choker, I can just kind of crank this out a little bit. And then if I blur it just slightly, let's just make a fast blur of like 2 or 3 pixels here. Now that's kind of basically going to be our fuzzy edge that defines where we're going to blur. Now we not only want to do this to the trees, but we also want to do this to the water line as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to duplicate the water key layer and call this water edges. And I'm going to copy this adjustment layer that's got all of our alpha channel and find edges stuff on it. and I'm going to go into the water edges comp, and I'm going to paste it in there. And now we've also got basically all the edges where our sky is kind of intersecting with our key here. So what I want to really do is I actually kind of want to combine these into one. So I want to have our sky edges and our water edges in one comp. So let's pre-comp the water edges comp, and then I'm going to take the sky edges comp, drop it on top, and I'm going to set the mode to darken. And that should, if I can find it in here, darken. Now we basically got a black and white image that defines the edges of where we're compositing new stuff into our plate. So when I apply the fast blur on our main comp to using this as an alpha, it's just going to affect these edges. So let's just do that. So I'm going to go back into our main comp here. I'm going to take our water edges too. I should actually rename that to just edges. Place that into our main comp, and I'm actually just going to turn off the visibility because we don't need to see that layer. And I'm going to put in a new adjustment layer and just apply a fast blur, and let's just make it really big. We'll make it 5 to start. So you can see it's blurring everything now. But if I take our edges layer, I'm just going to put that above, and I'm going to set it as luminance. I think it's luminance inverted. That's the one. So there we go. Now it's just blurring those edges out. And obviously 5 is way too much here. So maybe we just bring it down to 2. That's looking a lot better. So now you can see it's just blurring that edge. And that's kind of helping that sit into the plate a little bit more. It's getting rid of a little bit of those chunky edges that were kind of making it look a little bit unrealistic. Even 2 might be a bit much. Maybe just 1 might even be enough to do it there. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. So if we zoom out, that's starting to look pretty sweet. But it still doesn't look like a real sunset. And we can really fix a lot of those problems with color correction. So let's do that. Okay, so we're going to take our main comp here, and we're just going to pre-compose the entire thing. So now we're just going to apply a bunch of really simple color corrections here. So the first thing we're going to do is just apply a little bit of a curve. So we'll go under color correction, curves, and we'll just apply a standard sort of contrast adjustment, which is sort of taking the bottoms down and bringing the top part up a little bit just to make it a little bit more punchy. And we're just going to add a little bit more red into here, just sort of bring that up a little bit more into the highlights, and then just bring down the blues just ever so slightly. There we go. That's kind of making it look like a nice golden sunset. I think I might have just brought the blacks down a little bit too much. There we go. That's looking pretty nice. So if we compare the before and after, there we go. That's starting to look like a real sunset now. Okay, and one of my other little favorite things we can do here is just apply a little vignette. So I'm just going to make a new adjustment layer and apply the exposure adjustment, and we'll just take the gamma and we'll crank it down, and then I'm going to select our ellipse mask tool, just double click on that guy, and then I'm going to invert that mask and then just blur it out like crazy, and that's going to give us our vignette. Just zoom out, see how that looks. Toggle that on and off. You know, I think I can bring that down even more, something like that, and maybe even shrink this mask in a tiny bit. There you go, something like that. And I think the last thing we're going to do here is just apply a lens flare, just because we can. So I'm going to take the adjustment layer here, and I'm going to take the new optical flares plugin by Video Copilot, which is really awesome. And let's just pick a new flare here. I think the one I was picking before was under natural flares. Let's see, once it loads here. Yeah, rim light, that's the one I liked. And I just wanted to turn off one of the elements here because I didn't really like it so much. So there we go, that's looking pretty sweet. But what we need to do is we need to actually position that into the center of our shot here where our actual sun is. And this plugin has a really cool mode in it where it'll actually track the luminance of your plate. So if we set it to luminance and then set our source layer to be our pre-comp here, then basically it's going to go through and track it. And right now it's the settings are a little bit out of whack. So I'm just going to set the threshold to 100, tell it not to track the color. And I think set this around 60 and the scale around 30. That's looking pretty good. So now basically it's just doing the lens flare, but it's just on black. So we need to set this to over original, and then bam, there we go. Now we got our nice sunset lens flare going on there, and that's looking pretty sweet. So I'm just going to sort of scrub through here just to see if everything's sort of moving in place, and I think it is. So I think this is going to be our final version here. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to do a quick RAM preview, and then yeah, we'll come back and we'll see how this looks. All right, so we got our RAM preview going here, and I think this is looking pretty sweet. The edges are looking pretty decent. They could do with probably a little bit more work. Playing around with that refined edges would probably help a little bit. But this lens flare is looking really, really nice. I love it, and the sky is looking good. It's tracking into place. Everything looks good with the water as well. So I think this has been pretty successful. If we just sort of take a look at what we started with here, which is pretty dull and, oops, wrong way, pretty dull and bland there. I think we achieved something that looks really, really good. So we can compare before and after. I really, really think that that's a definite improvement. So I hope you guys liked that tutorial. If you guys have any questions about any of the topics we covered here, just feel free to shoot me an email or leave something in the comments. Talk to you soon. Bye.